Okay, picture this. It's June 22nd, 1979, down in Atlanta, Georgia. The heat and humidity are absolutely rising, but honestly, that is nothing compared to the sheer absolute panic setting in for two ambitious entrepreneurs standing in a totally empty parking lot. Forget everything you know about the polished, massive home improvement giant you probably shop at today. We're going all the way back to day one. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the incredibly chaotic birth, the brilliant strategy, and the eventual global dominance of the Home Depot.
Let's jump right into Section 1, a disastrous grand opening.
So the founders, Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank, they've literally put everything on the line. They opened up two sprawling, fully stocked warehouse stores that Friday morning, one on Memorial Drive and the other on Buford Highway. Their shelves are packed with paint cans and tools, the cash registers are ready to go. But there is one massive, glaring problem. The prime space, two-page newspaper ad they had bought in the Atlanta Journal and the Atlanta Constitution the day before never actually published. Because of this monumental logistical failure, nobody even knew they were open. The parking lots? Completely empty.
And you know, this perfectly captures the sheer, unadulterated panic of co-founder Bernie Marcus. I mean, imagine watching your massive financial risk just sitting there, completely ignored by the public. As Marcus later recalled, he's watching vendors eating their free hot dogs, cash flow is literally sitting at zero, and the clock is ticking. He genuinely thought right there on day one, my God, we're going to go down the drain. He thought the whole thing was going to fail before he even started.
Now, they were already squeezing by financially, so this was an absolute code red emergency. So how desperate did it get? Well, the founders and their wives literally went out into the empty parking lot and started handing out single $1 bills to children. Yeah, you heard that right. They were just hoping the kids would drag their parents inside the store. It's kind of the ultimate chaotic customer acquisition strategy, right? A pretty far cry from the incredibly sophisticated marketing machine we know today.
All right, moving on to Section 2, fired from Handy Dan. So let's back up a bit. Before Home Depot, Marcus and Blank were actually high-level executives at a really successful hardware store chain called Handy Dan Home Improvement. Back in 1972, Handy Dan goes public. But then just 3 years later, in 1975, Handy Dan's parent company, Daylin, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, Handy Dan was actually one of Daylin's few profitable assets, but all this corporate turbulence, it created a massive power struggle. And it all culminated in 1978 when Daylin's CEO, Sanford Sigiloff, abruptly fired both Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank.
Now you might be wondering, how does a parent company in bankruptcy fire the executives of its own successful subsidiary? Well, the answer really lies in the ownership breakdown. See, Daylin held a controlling 81% stake in Handy Dan, and that immense leverage gave Sigiloff the ultimate authority to oust Marcus and Blank. It was a devastating blow for them at the time, for sure. But honestly, getting fired turned out to be exactly the push they needed.
Actually, before we completely leave the Handy Dan era behind, I just have to share this quirky, brilliant little retail hack from their history. So back in the early 1980s, Texas had these strict religion-based blue laws that restricted what you could sell on Sundays. Handy Dan pioneered this really clever visual workaround. They opened on Sundays anyway, but they used white price stickers for goods that were allowed to be sold all week and blue stickers for the restricted Sunday items. This visual system was so effective at highlighting how absurd the rules were that it actually played a major role in getting those Texas blue laws repealed in 1984. How wild is that?
Okay, let's roll into Section 3, assembling the dream team.
So Marcus and Blank obviously brought their immense retail leadership to the table, but they were missing some crucial puzzle pieces: merchandising and money. Enter Pat Farah. He was a former stock boy turned executive who had actually recently started his own big box home improvement retailer called HomeCo. When HomeCo ran into some financing issues, Marcus and Blank scooped Farah right up to be their chief merchandising officer. And as for the capital, well, they brought in Ken Langone. He was a heavy-hitting Wall Street financier who organized the venture capital they needed to actually build these massive stores. Honestly, this was the ultimate retail dream team.
Which brings us to Section 4, building the Big Orange.
The psychology behind the Home Depot's branding is just absolutely fascinating. That iconic stenciled logo, it wasn't an accident. It was directly inspired by the crates used to transport freight, tying perfectly into the whole depot name. The text was stamped at an upright angle specifically to symbolize success. And of course, they christened it in that famous bright orange to stimulate activity and energy. But here's the crazy part. Early design sketches show that those legendary orange aprons were almost yellow or green. I mean, seriously, imagine walking into the Big Green today. It just kind of doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
And you know, the brand wasn't the only thing that was completely new. The entire business model was revolutionary. They called it warehouse-style retailing. We totally take this for granted now, but back then, a sprawling warehouse packed with thousands of products, insanely low prices, and staff trained to actually help you build things, that was a completely alien concept. In fact, the public was so confused by the sheer scale of the first stores that by 1980, Home Depot had to run specific newspaper ads just to define and explain what a warehouse-style store actually was.
All right, let's look at Section 5, a global empire's legacy.
Today, the Home Depot operates over 2,200 stores. Think about that scale. Their footprint has exploded way beyond Atlanta. We're talking the USA, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. They didn't just survive that disastrous first day. They literally conquered the continent.
And this comparison is just staggering to think about. On one hand, you have 1979, founders begging kids to come inside with $1 bills. On the other hand, today, dominating the market with a massive $350 billion market capitalization and employing roughly 450,000 people. It's a really powerful reminder that even the most dominant corporations in the world can start out with terrifying, near-fatal stumbles.
Now, as the company scaled into this massive empire, the founders naturally stepped into new phases of their lives, utilizing their immense wealth and influence in very different ways. To really understand the wider impact of Home Depot's success, let's take an objective look at the highly public profile of their financial architect, Ken Langone.
Through his venture capital work and the massive success of Home Depot, Langone accumulated a net worth of roughly $10.3 billion. And he's directed a really significant portion of this toward philanthropy. Most notably, he donated over $300 million to NYU's medical school, which is now named NYU Langone Health, specifically to ensure that tuition is completely free for all medical students. He was also an early signatory to the Giving Pledge, promising to give away the majority of his wealth, and his significant contributions to the Catholic Church even resulted in him being knighted into the Order of St. Gregory the Great by Pope Benedict XVI.
Beyond philanthropy, Langone's wealth has made him a major figure in American politics. Objectively looking at his record, he has been a major donor to the Republican Party for decades. He's financially backed a wide array of presidential campaigns, from Ross Perot back in the 90s to Giuliani, Christie, Romney, Donald Trump, and Nikki Haley. On the policy front, he actively opposes initiatives like single-payer healthcare, guaranteed minimum income, and free college tuition. Additionally, over in the realm of foreign policy, he helped found a U.S. business group in 2022 aimed at constructively engaging with China.
And, well, that brings us to the end of our journey today. From a terrifyingly empty parking lot in Atlanta to a $350 billion global empire that completely changed how an entire society buys hardware, the story of the Home Depot is just an absolute masterclass in resilience, brilliant merchandising, and sheer determination. So I'll leave you with this final thought. As retail continues to evolve in the digital age, how will the next generation of founders build upon the massive orange foundation laid down by Marcus, Blank, Farah, and Langone? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.